Greetings, everyone. Your cartoonist pal Stan here with another episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon. The show I'm doing to celebrate the fact that 2024 is the 50th anniversary of the game Dungeons & Dragons and the entire hobby of tabletop role-playing games. I'm doing that, if you're watching this, you probably know, by having conversations with people I know, mostly people I know, who have worked on the game. Been in-house working on Dungeons and Dragons, and have had wide and interesting careers beyond that. So we're talking about the history of the game, or our history with the game, our history on interacting and being in the trenches, as it were, and the future, where things are going. And yeah, I don't know why here on episode 38 I need to explain that to you, but someone's watching for the first time. And that's what we're doing. Another interesting thing about today is this episode is recorded. Most of these are done live. If you're watching this and you're not one of the lucky ones who got a private invitation, this is a recorded episode because I'm going to be at Gamehole Con this weekend. And so is my guest today. My guest is Monte Cook, who has worked on several iterations of the game and is known for a lot of, you know what, I'm not even going to start naming things because why would I do that when I can just bring him on? And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to hit this button and Monty's here. Hi, Monty. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Stan. Thanks for having me.
I always, you and I know each other pretty well, and it's always a weird thing for me to say, hey, you want to come on and let me interview you, and we'll, have a conversation like that?
I don't know. I always interview my friends.
Well, I guess, as in so many things, I just need to be more like you. So, Monty, presuming that someone just wandered in here accidentally, and they wanted to know why I chose you, what's the quick background Monte Cook is that if people ask you to say in an elevator?
Well, so I guess I would say that I started working on RPGs very early while I was still in college, and so I've been doing this for a really long time. Certainly the thing that I've done that is the sort of the biggest deal, I suppose, is working on 3rd edition D&D, but I've touched D&D in a lot of other ways, and other games as well. It's all I've ever done is games,
which is awesome. I mean, so many people I've talked to, getting on talking to 30 pretty big names, and it's amazing how few can say that all they've done professionally has been games, right? We've all had to tag out, either come out from something else or tag out occasionally and come back. I think you and Matt Forbeck might be maybe the only two, but certainly the two most prominent in my head that come in. It's like, you know what? That's it. That's what you've done.
Well, weirdly, since you bring Matt up, I mean, Matt and I also worked together on some of the very first things that we ever did professionally. So Matt and I, we've had parallel careers, I guess, for a long, long time.
So as folks know, I like to start just kind of chatting about how you got into it. We're talking about the history of the game, so starting with the history, and most of the folks, it was really interesting. The first shows were all folks who worked early in, so they were among the people who began being the designers for it. In the last 10 or so have been people who are more in my age category, and so we've had similar kind of, hey, when did you start? Oh, about the same time. And I know that you and I also fall in that category. I'm probably a little older, but you're a little more advanced. How did you get into to gaming as a hobby? Did it start with D&D?
Pretty much. I mean, I came from a family that liked to play games, although we didn't play a wide variety of games. We certainly didn't play role-playing games, but a lot of cards, a lot of that kind of thing. But I first heard about D&D in um, the very atypical place of Sunday school when I was probably about 10 years old. I shouldn't say it that way. I was 10 years old, and I so this would have been like 78,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple of kids were in Sunday school. This is like before Sunday school started, and they were two brothers, and they were talking about some kind of game they had played the night before, and I only caught sort of these brief little bits. There was something about a magical crown. There was something about graph paper, and there was something about traps. And that's like all I picked up on. But I knew right then and there, I wanted in. This is a game I wanted to play. And they so I talked to them, and we did play together. And they used the little original brown book,
Mm-hmm.
brown booklets out of the little brown box, and so we played that. I played with them a few times. Um, I don't want to get into it too far, but I didn't really care for them. But I really
Yeah.
liked the game, and so as soon as I could, I went off and decided to get my own stuff. That was difficult though because I lived in a tiny little town in South Dakota, and the only place where it was even possible was a B. Dalton bookstore, which of course has long since gone away. It was in the mall, and I had to go in, and I'm pretty sure I had to special order something. And anyway, the book that I ended up getting, so the first book that I owned, not the first book that I used to play,
Yeah.
was the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide. That was the
Ooh.
game. That was the
Wow.
book that I had. So I guess this probably would have been 79 by this point.
Yeah.
Um, and anyway, I
That's a tough. That's a tough first book to own.
read it cover to cover, which it is clearly not a good book to read cover to cover. I remember the book starts out with like disease and some it just not at all meant to be a teaching tool. But I started with that and kind of like used the knowledge that I had from the little brown books that I had used but didn't
Right.
own, and um, this book, and sort of cobbled together a working system, filled in the blanks where I had to. So I was already being a game designer,
Right.
and got another friend of mine to play, and he and I played together for quite a while. And then eventually, got the other books and found myself playing first edition D&D. So that was that's what I think of when I think of the early days, even though I didn't truly start with that.
Right.
And my gaming career didn't really get serious until I was in what we called industrial arts class. This would have been a couple of years later,
Shop.
and it was shop for most people, right? But anyway, there was this other kid who was in there, and we were doing like a leather working stuff, and he was making some kind of patch, um, and it had a crossed sword and axe on it. And so, even though I was not a very brave kid, I didn't like to approach people I didn't already know. I came up to this kid and I said, "Do you play Dungeons and Dragons?" And he said, "Yes." And it turned out that was Bruce Cordell, who is a fellow game designer to this day. And
Yeah.
he and I gathered together a bunch of other friends and had a game group for 5 or 6 years, and that's where most of those teenage gaming years came from, was with him.
I love those. I love those stories. I'm pretty sure I've told you that I also was introduced to D&D through someone else's rules, and when I tried to get my own, I couldn't get any. And I lived in the New York metro area, right? But if you didn't, you had to know where the model train stores were because they were the
Right.
only ones that carried it. And when it came to the B. Daltons, which there were plenty of where I lived, but they still didn't carry a lot of them, and they sold out quickly when they did. And the first product I ever was able to own was the coloring book,
Right. Very cool.
which lucked out because there's a game in the middle of it.
Right.
And I to this day I keep it around, A, because it's nostalgic for me, but B, because it turned out to be a great introduction to the game, not just for me, but for my parents and anyone else that didn't know it. Like, this is what the game is about. You're going through here trying to find treasure, and you kill monsters and kill demons, and like, oh, that sounded boring to them, but it didn't sound like trouble.
Yeah, I didn't have that at all. I didn't have a good introduction for friends and family, and I was right there at ground zero for the Satanic Panic.
Right?
Um,
I don't know how could they
uh,
argue with graph paper. That's math. It's like math
yeah.
homework. Jay Taylor says he wants to thank Monte Cook for all of your contributions to the gaming world.
Oh well, you're welcome. I, glad you have contributed to somebody else's fun. That's really cool.
Um, all right. While we continue this, I'm now going to switch over. Although, I have let my thing get out of control. Oh, I hate when this happens. And I'm going to switch over views so that I'm going to do drawing. And for this episode, again, we're recording this in September, but it's going out in October when we will be focusing on the year 2008, which is right around the start of 4th edition. And the image I've got for today is from the character record sheets. It's a really good piece of art for that. So I'm gonna do some sketching on this. All right, so you played through high school. You got to meet Bruce, which turned out to be pretty good for everyone in the gaming world. And then you went to college. I know
I did.
you were saying earlier. What did you study? Because um, there certainly wasn't gaming tracks like there are these days.
Well, so I did the next best thing. I always used to joke that I majored in Dungeons and Dragons because I had a double major in creative writing and ancient history.
All right, that'll do it. Um, and but what what did you have in mind to do with that, or did you have in mind to find a way to?
Well, now you sound like my dad.
Well, I'm not pushing you. I just want to know because yeah, I had some things I did because I had to answer for my parents too.
You know, I think that my realistic goal was to to be a teacher,
Mm,
but but even so, I got to tell you, when I was still in high school, and I have told Zeb this story. When I was in high school, and I picked up in B Dalton an adventure module called Dwellers of the Forbidden City, and right there it said by David Cook. That was the first moment, like there a light bulb went off, and it was, because I'd been so used to everything being by Gary Gygax that I didn't really give it any thought. And
Right.
but here was someone, and it was like, hey, that's my last name. And I thought to myself, well, that means that it's actually someone's job to create this stuff. And so secretly, even from that point, and I was probably about, I'm guessing, I was probably about 15 years old. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to make D&D. So I don't think I didn't really ever think that was a realistic goal, but it was kind of always hovering there in the background for me. I don't even think I really even told people that was my goal. But I had high hopes. That's what I wanted to do.
It's like anyone that gets into as a professional athlete, it's not a realistic goal, but you have to have it. If you don't have that as your sights, you don't make it.
It's true. And as Jim Ward was always very happy to tell us when we were at TSR, that there were fewer professional game designers than astronauts in the world, and it was a very selected group of people. He kept telling us. So it's probably worth mentioning that by the time I got to college, I started up a new D&D group, but pretty quickly we moved on to a different game.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is mostly about D&D, but
in high school,
in high school, my group had started to be kind of experimental, and the experimenting that we did was that we read Dragon magazine rather, and saw all the ads for the cool other things and ordered some of them. That's how we started with Villains and Vigilantes, for example, which is a game that I know that you are.
A very similar story. Again, just. But go ahead. No, I'm not going to tell my part. I'm just going to say yes. Again, we have just similar paths.
Yeah. Yes. So one of those things that we saw was an ad for something that was called Rollmaster, and at the time, what Rollmaster really was it was kind of intended to be a supplemental product for Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, eventually it became its own game, but they had these different aspects of it: arms law and spell law and claw law.
Right.
And we were particularly interested in spell law, and so we ordered those to just get more spells and whatnot. And then by the time I got to college, I thought to myself, well, I'd like to just give this whole thing a try. And so we started playing Rollmaster. And the only reason that I bring that up, I mean, it's what we played for a few years, but it's also how I got my start in the industry as a professional.
Right.
I basically had been running Rollmaster for a long time, and a friend of mine from college, this would have been my third year in college, went to Origins, the game convention, and met a bunch of the people from the company that produced Rollmaster, Iron Crown Enterprises.
Right.
And was talking about me and the things that I had created and how I should be writing for them or whatever, and overblowing my talents and whatnot was kind of Steve's way, but I appreciate him for it, particularly for the
It
career that
worked
I've
out pretty
had.
well in the end.
Yeah, it was all right. But anyway, he found out that they were interested in this one particular book. It was going to be called Creatures and Treasures 2, which was, as it sounds, a book of monsters and magic items. And he brought back a bunch of materials for me to look at and to contact them. And I did. And they got me started working on this product. And it was the summer between, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, is the summer between my third and fourth years in college, and wrote this book at night while working in a warehouse during the day for my summer job, and that book came out while I was still in college, and I started working on my next one, and I've never had a real job because of that. I graduated, I went straight to work for them, and from there, a couple of years later, in '94, was when I started working for TSR on back to D&D.
All right. I mean, I just want to say that although I mean D&D is the hook for what it does. Yeah, I talk about all kinds of things wherever the career went. I know, as you know, I uh, did my first professional work for um, West End,
Right.
and I certainly, similar to you, I got to Villains and Vigilantes was a what I was playing in college. Right, the people that were playing D&D didn't interest me. I came and I wanted to play more D&D, and that I didn't like the people. Kind of similar to what your beginning part of your story. Um, but I was also a comic book collector. You
Mm-hmm.
like comic books, Monty?
I've read a comic or two,
Yeah.
a couple of funny.
Yeah, and so so villains. Same with you. We saw the ads for this thing, Villains and Vigilantes, and
And you
um,
were attracted by the amazing Jeff D. art?
I was.
You
It was
had to
very
be, right?
familiar.
It was incredible, and it was very different from what other things you were seeing. Even though he was also a D&D artist, I feel like that Villains and Vigilantes art just leapt off the page.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really did, and it certainly captured the feeling of comics. I think just rules wise, better than D&D captured the feeling of Tolkien.
Yeah,
Uh, so and I could get people who were interested to play a superhero game where I couldn't get them to play D&D. So
interesting.
I think that one of the again, so, since this is the topic, I'm happy to say about. I think one of the best things about V&V as the kind of light frameworky system, it was very easy to dig in there, and and that was my first game design. Kind of like you were. Well, that's it's not true, but I did other game design in a similar way. But yeah, I spent a lot of time breaking down how V&V worked and rejiggering it and creating new things for it. None of it was ever published, but boy, did I learn game design playing that game.
Well, again, the sort of the means kind of dictate the ends a little bit, because we ordered Villains and Vigilantes from Dragon Magazine, from the ad for Fantasy Games Unlimited. But in our teenage minds, it took for flippin' ever for that thing to arrive, and
Right?
we wanted to play superheroes now. So my first real game design was actually um, making a game from scratch that allowed us to play superheroes until Villains and Vigilantes showed up. And I don't really remember very much about it, um, but I remember it was like a complete and playable game.
Huh.
And yeah, that was. I mean, there had been a lot of game design like activities, like taking, like I had mentioned, Rollmaster and Spell Law and whatnot, and taking that stuff and making it work with Dungeons and Dragons was in and of itself a game design exercise,
Right.
right? But yeah, that was. It didn't really have a name, but that game was the first game in total that I completely designed, and it was just born entirely out of impatience.
Um, so you working at Iron Crown, what were some of the things you were working on? Because that's when I first met you, was while you were working at Iron
I
Crown.
remember. Yeah. So Rollmaster was very similar in genre and approach with D&D, but it was because it was always like it was born from being optional rules for Dungeons and Dragons, that even when it became its own book or its own game, it was still all about optional rules. Like we just kept producing. They used to call them Rollmaster companions, and every Rollmaster companion that I think we'd do about one a year, was always the best selling Rollmaster book, and it was just new rules, new spells, new everything. Um, but I also, my second product was actually a setting book called Dark Space,
Mm-hmm.
which took uh, one of Iron Crown's other games, Space Master, and it kind of mashed Space Master and Rollmaster together to do kind of both genres, and then set it in a horror um, horror setting, and a very Lovecraftian setting, and all of those things just kind of had major echoes that kind of moved through the rest of my career, really, from genre mashups to Lovecraftian horror and whatnot. And um, it's probably worth mentioning that Iron Crown also made the Middle Earth role playing game, which was
Mm-hmm.
their much more popular game. Just most at the time, it was probably one of the most popular non D&D product lines that
Right.
existed,
Right.
just because of the Tolkien connection. And I never worked on that even a little bit. I was not like I had read and enjoyed Tolkien, but I was not an aficionado by any means.
Right.
And those products went in deep into the lore and stuff. And so the people around me would be talking like, I'd read Lord of the Rings, I'd read the Silmarillion, but they'd be talking about things and I wouldn't have any idea who they were talking about or what. And then at the same time, Iron Crown also made a deal with Hero Games, and Hero Games' big product was Champions, the
Mm-hmm.
superhero. And so I ended up taking my Villains and Vigilantes experience and my make up my own superhero game experience, and I also did a lot of work on the Champions game, less as a designer, and more as an editor. But yeah, um, but that game, while a great game, that game was never my first love.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
hear you. I hear you.
and so I worked on it for a few years, but and honestly, the thing that came out of my time on Champions was the sort of the guidance and the advice that I got from the former person in charge of champions, who was a guy named Rob Bell, who
Hmm.
is who went on to become a Virginia politician and had a very different career path than I did. But he was really a really smart guy, really kind and helpful guy, and gave me a lot of really good advice.
Is there anything that sticks out that?
Um, like he initially said, and throughout my career, this piece of advice has stuck with me, even though I think it's actually at this point a lot more nuanced than Rob pitched it as. But of course, now as I speak in 2024, I have a lot more experience than Rob did back in 1990 or whatever.
Right.
But the piece of advice was this, and that is that the people who are really really good, the people who are out there and they're already super creative, they know the rules inside and out, they don't need you. They don't need a game designer and they don't need products. So what you're really doing is you're making products for the people who actually do need you, who don't have the time or the inclination or the expertise to be coming up with adventures or new rules or whatever. And like I said, that's a really complicated issue when it
Right.
comes to game design and who you're really designing games for. But it has always stuck with me, and I think at least at the outset, at least in sort of in general, that is still a truism.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a corollary to the the darkest secret for the game professionals is that they don't need us at all. They don't need to ever. Once you have the game, you don't ever need to buy a product again, unless you don't have time to do it. Right? You can just run with it, and if the company ever pisses you off enough, you've got your game for the rest of your life.
For sure. And that is definitely a truism, uh, but I'm glad that you added the little addendum there. Unless you don't have time, and I
Right. Well, I
think
mean that's what it's. I get out of what Rob said. Right. There are people that do need it.
they do, right. They want to keep playing the game, but they either lack the time or the inclination to make this stuff up on their own and appreciate some help.
So how is it then? Let's reel it on over to D&D again, since again that's in the title. Uh, how is it that you made your jump from Iron Crown over to TSR?
So I left Iron Crown and I moved to Denver, Colorado. Still doing freelance for Iron Crown though, and I started doing freelance for other companies. Um, and one of those companies was TSR. But my start as a designer for TSR wasn't Dungeons and Dragons. It was the Marvel superheroes role playing game, and I did a lot of work on the Marvel superheroes role playing game.
This is
And
the face rip, the 1980s, early
yep,
90s version.
yep. And then so in fact I wrote what was going to be the largest box set game product that had was ever the TSR had ever done, and therefore anyone had ever done. And
Right.
it was this huge big box with three big books in it, and it was going to be everything that we know about Marvel space. It's going to be called
Ooh.
the Infinity Watch box set. It was going to have every alien race that had ever shown up in a Marvel comic all statted up, and all the characters, and Drax the Destroyer and Super Skrull and all these people. Huge chapters on the Kree and the Skrull. It was really actually super fun to work on.
I
Um,
bet.
but if you're a fan of that game, you might be thinking, and you're listening to this, you might be thinking, "Hey, I don't remember that box." And therein lies the sad part of this tale, which is I finished it. I completely finished it and turned it over, and then got a phone call from a guy by the name of Bruce Hurd at TSR who handled all the freelancers. And he said, "Yeah, we don't have that license anymore. And so that product is just going to have to get shelved." And as far as I know, another designer, or rather another editor at TSR named Stephen Shend is probably the only one who still has all of those files on some ancient out of out of uh, out of style format product, or medium, some kind of disc. I don't remember. And so yeah, that never existed. And the funny part about that is that Bruce then, clearly feeling bad. I mean, I got paid for it. In
Right.
fact, I put a down payment on a house for the amount of work and money that I got for that box set. But uh, but it from a freelancer's point of view, it really sucks that you spend a whole year. Actually, it was a little more than a year working on something that never comes out, right? Because that's
Yeah.
all that time, and your name's not out there. No one's seeing anything. And so he felt really bad, and so he said, I'm going to immediately give you a new assignment. You can start working on this today." And it was for Gamma World. It was for some adventure in Gamma World. I don't really remember too much about it. And the reason I don't remember too much about it was like about a week passed, and Bruce Hurd gives me a call and says, "Yeah, you know that Gamma World thing? Yeah, we're not doing Gamma World anymore." And so that got canceled. And so then his almost verbatim he said, "I'm going to give you an assignment for a Forgotten Realms product because I'm pretty sure we're not going to cancel the Forgotten Realms." And he was right. And it was part of this Forgotten Realms product called Elminster's Ecologies. And
Mm.
I wrote about a bunch of environments and monsters from those environments in the world of Faerun. And so that would have been my first D&D product.
First one that actually came. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was very shortly thereafter. In fact, I think I was still working on that product, perhaps, when the head of what was called back then R&D, Tim Brown, gave me a call and asked me to come to TSR. And here's the thing about that. I again, Tim Brown is someone that I really want to give a shout out to.
Mm.
I think very, very highly of him, and wouldn't probably be here today without him. And it's partially because when Tim took over that role, he wanted people who had experience in the game industry. Up until that point, new hires at TSR almost never came from other game companies or other games. And so that was kind of new. And so he brought me in and wanted to hire me. But the thing is, my entire time in the game industry, because this would have been the very end of 1993. So I've been in the game industry full time now for almost 4 years, and all I had heard about working at TSR were horror stories. I was told that the designers were working on manual typewriters, and it was very sweatshop like, and there
Right.
wasn't a lot of fun. We were just kind of in these dark rooms typing away, and it sounded terrible. But I really wanted to see TSR. I really wanted to see where it had all sort of happened. I wanted to see Lake Geneva. So I said yes to the invitation to come for the interview, thinking I'm definitely not going to take it. But I wanted to see it, and of course I got there, and it wasn't what I had been told. I mean, yes, it was maybe a little primitive. In the computers were a little out of date and whatnot, but it was still clearly a really fun place with a lot of fun people. And so instead of saying no, I said yes. Started working there on April 4th, the day that will live in infamy, at TSR in 1994.
It was you came in on Day of Infamy Day?
I did. Yeah.
That's awesome, because that certainly has come up in a number of these conversations.
I'm sure.
Jim Ward's telling of his Day of Infamy story that is celebrated every year. Funny, never celebrated its Monte Cook hiring day.
Well, because it was already a holiday. I mean, so that does mean though that getting drawn into the sort of common area there at TSR and being told Jim's Day of Infamy story was my first day at the job.
What a way to start. Hello, new hire. Let me tell you about the time I got fired. Ignominiously.
And then, of course, there was the Test of Valor. Have you talked about the Test of Valor with anybody here?
It's been mentioned, but not really talked about. Okay, before we go, D&D Ditches is, I just bought Elementary Ecology and didn't know it was your first game product. There you go. Ditches, you learn something new every day. Linnea George says, I need adventure writers. I'm not a very creative, out-of-the-box thinker. Love running D&D adventures. Pushes me to be creative, and well-written adventures give me guardrails and directions. So, yeah.
Exactly. I know you're out there, and I know that lots of people like that are out there, and I think that that's fantastic. And you know what? I like reading adventures written by other people too.
Yeah,
and I like using them.
Robert Emerson says something more along these lines. That definitely times you realize you're buying to support the folks you enjoyed, and appreciation to buy new ideas or something you couldn't do yourself. Right? But kind of like what you were saying, there's always, even in something I'm not going to use for its intended purpose, there's always stuff to scavenge out of it. That's
agreed. I've always felt really strongly about that, and when people have said, well, I don't buy published adventures to me, I've usually said, well, then you're really missing out. There's some really cool stuff out there, and even if you don't use it entirely, you're gonna find some cool ideas in there.
Yeah, even if you don't use it the way they intended it, there's no lack of things that give you springboards that you would never get to otherwise.
Well, let's talk about the Mask of Valor.
Okay, yes. Let's talk about the Mask of Valor. What is this Mask of Valor you've mentioned?
So the Mask of Valor was this tradition for the R&D department at TSR. Every new hire got forced to do the ritual of the Mask of Valor, and what it was somebody had a fencing mask. So it was a big full face mask that was full of little holes. I mean, we've probably all seen fencing masks, and the idea was that you stood up against a wall, we're wearing the Mask of Valor, and then another designer, would throw darts, like regular, bar darts, at you and try to get them to stick in the holes of the mask. But what they did, what they would do every time is they would show you, they would put the mask on you, and then they'd bring up a dart and they'd show you the dart, and it was a real metal tip dart. But then in the process of getting ready to throw them, they would switch out the darts, so they were actually these soft plastic tipped ones, and so no one was getting hurt with the Mask of Valor. But the whole idea was kind of a test of courage.
Right.
And so this was the other thing that happened to me on my very first day. Was I don't remember if it was before or after the Day of Infamy speech, but I also had to submit to the Mask of Valor, and I think I'm not positive about this, but I think it was Colin McComb who threw the darts at me.
Yeah.
I know he was involved. Yeah.
So, by the time I got there, they just talked about it. No one ever threw the darts at me.
I was actually trying to remember who there was. There was a last person. So Ray Valise was an editor, and he was hired pretty quickly after I was there, and I know that he did it. But I want to say that it was like Stan. Did you come on before or after Keith Strom?
I came on shortly after Keith Strom, a couple of months after Keith.
I want to say that Keith might have been the last Mask of Valor participant. And I don't really remember the story, but
I know that Ed Stark, who also came on after you, but he loved that kind of stuff, and he was a big fan of the Mask of Valor, and he really wanted to, and he might have done this with Keith, and it might have been what killed it. But he wanted to take a thing where they took instead of doing what you say, showing you the real one, show them the plastic one and say it's just for fun, and then take a real one and put it in the wall like a 5 feet off, like nowhere near throwing it at it, but throw it in the chunk at the same time someone throws a plastic one at your face.
I would, if that is what happened, I can see how that would have been the end of it.
Everyone I know he's ever told that to said that's a terrible idea. We should never do that. And knowing Ted, I don't know if he ever really meant that he would do it, but also knowing Ted, maybe he would. Robert Owens says now there's an HR phone call. Yeah.
We're wild and woolly days. Yep.
Dave Shepard says thanks for making Ghost Walk and answering a lot of D&D questions on your forums over the years.
Cool. Yeah.
Ghost Walk was a fun. I did editing or development on that. You and Sean Reynolds did that one, right?
Sean Reynolds and I co-designed it. Yep.
All right. So since we started on the half hour, I'm having trouble. I usually do this starting on an hour. I'm trying to track the time and keep it. No, we got time. The other thing, as you said, the big if there's the big thing you did for D&D, it was working on 3rd edition, and there's lots of talk. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into an interview on that because people can find videos of you talking about that all over the place.
There might be one or two. Yeah.
Yeah. But looking back at that again here in the 50th anniversary, what it's so I'll tell you one. It's weird to me, and I only noticed this as I was doing this show that 3rd edition comes exactly at the halfway point in D&D's history. It's exactly at the 26th year in this run. Now that we've had another half of the history, what is there anything that you can, any way you place 3rd edition within kind of the milieu of what's been and what's come since?
You mean other than the high point?
Yeah. That's a terrific answer.
Well, I'm trying to catch up with you because my mind was still on the Mask of Valor, which was 1994, and
Well, if there are things you want to
third
talk
edition.
about between then, let's. This is your conversation, Monty. I'm just here to encourage it.
There's like all of Planescape, which
Yeah.
was near and dear to my heart, and so, but that's fine. But third edition.
No, I mean, like I say,
So
the main reason I did it was I'm trying to, like I said before we started, I try and keep these to about an hour and a half or less. But we're only about 45 minutes in now, so we got time. Let's go to Planescape because I know when I got there, that's what you were most deeply involved in, and I know how important that was for you.
well, again, and it goes back to that or those early days. I think it was the first week that I was at TSR because you'll probably remember, Stan, when a new product would come in, everybody in the R&D department would get a copy, and those copies always came in on Friday. So it would have been the Friday, the end of the first week that I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can't remember who delivered those things anymore. Maybe it was Bruce Hurd. Anyway, whoever dropped it off in my cube um, dropped off this box, Planescape, and I don't think I didn't even know it was coming. I didn't know it existed, and which is ironic because by that point Zeb Cook was a friend of mine
Mm-hmm.
and had the cube next door, and I didn't really know what he had been working on. Anyway, this thing shows up, and I open up this box and I just devour it, and I would just thought this is why I'm here. This is the D&D stuff that I want to be working on. And it wasn't the first thing that I got to work on. There was a number of other projects that I enjoyed and had fun with, but once I got to working on Planescape, uh, I think I feel like I really hit my stride in my TSR years, and I made a lot of really good close friends. We kind of got to be known as the Planescape team, and that would have been like Colin McComb and Ray Valise and Michelle Carter, and our creative director was Andrea Hayday for most of it, and it was a great team, super creative, and we were just very much like we were watching the same movies and reading the same books and listening to the same music, and it was all very tiny little cult like in the middle of TSR. Those of us who were pretty much working on that stuff mostly, and it was great. It was a great experience, fantastic, fantastic group experience, a fantastic collaborative design environment that I will always look fondly on. Um, and it birthed Ray's Cube comics and stories, um,
Yeah. All
which
right. Now, there's one that. Please
I wasn't.
explain that.
I actually debated whether I was going to bring this up in this interview, but I decided it's too important not to talk about.
I also thought I'm not bringing it up unless Monty does, but I hope he does.
So I had a bunch of action figures in my office, and my friend and editor Ray Valise had a bunch in his. Ray actually took over the cubicle office that Zeb had vacated when he left TSR, so his was right next to mine, and we just started playing around with these action figures, mostly in Ray's Cube. And what we would do is we would set up and create our own little stories that we would call issues because they were, comic book related. But very, very quickly, um, these became extraordinarily silly and had nothing to do with the actual characters that each action figure would represent. We gave each person, each little guy, their own personality and their own relationships with them, and we started integrating like whatever toys we could get our hands on. We had little dinosaurs and all kinds of different things, and we set up these elaborate stories. And other people started seeing that we were doing this, and some people, like Colin McComb, got involved in the creation as well. And so we called this Raise Cube Comics and Stories, named after the Walt Disney comic. And we started, like, other people started getting really interested and would come over and would come to Raise Cube, and they would say, "So is there a new issue today?" And then they would sit and listen as whoever had created that day's issue would describe what was going on. And it was always for laughs, and it was always weird and silly and strange, and by that I mean wonderful. And like one of the things that always sticks out with me is we had an Incredible Hulk action figure, and I took some green silly putty that was exactly the same color as the Hulk's hair, and I gave him big bushy sideburns. And then we took this paper clip that was all stripy, and we wrapped it around his neck so that he looked like he had like a beaded necklace on, and he became forevermore known as 70s Hulk. And he always talked like a late 60s, early 70s kind of dude who is more interested in surfing and whatnot than anything. I could go on and on. We could talk the rest of this interview about this.
Maybe we should have you back. Maybe if I can get you and Ray on together, we can have a specific Ray's Comic Cuban Stories episode.
And it would be hilarious for the three people who know what the hell we're talking about.
Right. You know what? That's the beauty of having my own show.
But yeah, so that was an important part of the entire time that, almost the entire time that we were at TSR. It was a big part of the Planescape team, and it was super silly. And it's why I always tell people, like, even when things got bad at TSR, because obviously they did, and eventually Wizards of the Coast bought TSR or whatever, I will still defend what a great place TSR was to work,
right,
and how fun it was, and how it creatively fostered us, and I still think of it as one of the most creative periods of my career. And that can be a transition to what you had originally asked about, which was third edition.
See, before we do that, because we've got a question here, was Planescape an influence on Invisible Sun? Which is something that's from your current company.
And the answer is absolutely yes. But you could ask me, was Planescape an influence on pretty much anything that I did after Planescape? And the answer is going to be yes. It was extremely formative to me. And, not just in the flavor and the tone, but like what Zeb did with Planescape kind of taught me, and not just Zeb, but he started it, obviously, but the other people who worked on early Planescape, they taught me that there's a completely different way that you can present a role-playing game product that is full of story and flavor and whatnot, and not just, hit dice and armor class and whatnot. And
right.
And that is what has influenced everything that I have done since then. And just really exploring RPG creation. I don't want to get all philosophical, but exploring RPG creation as its very own type of storytelling and narrative a narrative creation, and the idea that there's within role playing there are multiple ways to do
Right.
that and to present that. That was very eye opening for me and very
Um,
fun.
David Shepard says, I still need to figure out David, you may not really need to think about it this hard. I still need to figure out exactly how to get Ghost Walk to fit with Planescape and Spelljammer.
I say go to town.
That's right.
Make that work.
it They work. It's just it. Um, a lot of my favorite products, says Robert Emerson, came out of the 90s TSR folk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard there are several lost adventures for Planescape. Several lost adventures for Planescape. Would you know much about that?
Well, I mean, there was always meant to be a follow up to the last Planescape product, which was Faction War.
Right.
Because Faction War came along after Wizards of the Coast bought D&D, but what was written back when we were still at TSR. That's true of a lot of products that came out like in those first year or two of WotC. But there was always meant to be a follow up, but WotC then canceled Planescape before it could be done. So in sort of the most ironic Planescape twist that could come along was we designed this product that basically just tore Planescape all apart, and then we never got to do the product that put it all back together.
You can't tear it apart. We're shutting it down.
So that's too bad. And there might be some other like TSR did a lot of weird little things where there would be some limited product that would only go to certain retailers or whatever, and they would get us to write adventures for that. And so that might be.
I would guess. My guess is that it's probably what you were talking about. That's the kind of thing that everyone would know about. This thing was supposed to happen, and it never did.
Right.
All right, but let's get back to my fascinating question.
Okay. 3rd edition. So what a lot of people don't know is that there was work on 3rd edition before anyone moved over to Wizards. And that is kind of all due to the shepherding of the game line by Steve Winter. And so he and others had already kind of figured out, some of the really big major changes that happened in 3rd edition, armor class going up rather than down, and things of that nature. Those really basic things. But I don't mean basic as in inconsequential. I mean basic as being the most consequential.
Right. The launching points.
Yeah, right. And then when it came time to, when we were at Wizards of the Coast, basically anybody who wanted to work on 3rd edition was supposed to write a little essay that was about what they would do if they could work on the new game and what changes they would make. And like most people, I did one of those and found myself on the team. And the team was originally Skip Williams and Rich Baker and I. Skip and Rich had worked together a lot. In 2nd edition days, there were these products called Player's Option. And some of that stuff sort of became the basis for 3rd edition. But I'll be honest, I think I thought that more of 3rd edition would be based on the Player's Option stuff.
Right.
And so I always kind of joke, when I was selected to be on the team, I thought that my role was going to be the kooky kid who came in and just suggested all the crazy ideas that everyone else would, pat me on the head and say, no, we can't do that. We can't go that far. But that was not the case at all. And so when I was out there saying, let's bring back the half orc, let's bring back the barbarian, everyone was there saying, no, good idea, let's do that. And I immediately realized, oh, no one's going to censor me. I have to censor myself if I want some of this stuff to not, if I don't want things to go too far.
Be
But that's
careful what I say; it might happen.
exactly, and that that's more of a joke than a reality, but it's still kind of true. Um, so yeah, and that process went on for 3 years. There were some obviously there were some changes for a while. Peter Atkinson himself was directly involved and kind of
Mm-hmm.
leading the process and on the design team, and then eventually Jonathan Tweet joined, and Rich Baker left, and um, uh, but it was fantastic process, fantastic time. I'm extremely proud of third edition.
Mm-hmm.
And so I jokingly said that it was the high point, and it is. This is a complicated opinion. It is probably still my favorite edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and yet it is not a game that I currently play
Right.
because it's a little more. It's a little more than I want. I can look back on it now, hindsight being 2020, and the whole idea of the character build, which was something that was innovative with third edition and now has become kind of a staple of D&D. That I enjoy it, but I would like I also just like to I like to get to the adventure. I like to get to the story, and kind of getting bogged down into the minutia of skill points and things of that nature don't
Right.
appeal to me as much. But I'm still like, if you are the kind of person for whom it appeals to, I think it's still a fantastic game that I am super proud of, um, and I know that there are plenty of people who are still playing that edition.
It's. I think it's what I'm about to say is a stupid oversimplification, but I think that you could look at it as second edition was taking first edition and cleaning it up and polishing it to be the best that it could be, and third
100%.
edition was the first time stepping in and saying, okay, that's good and all, but let's let's tear it down to the brads. Let's take it down, see what we need, and build a whole new game instead of just trying to make it the shiniest version of what it was.
I would agree with that in general.
I say I think that's a simplification, like a
The
gross.
only thing that I kind of object to is the whole new game,
Right, right.
because I don't think it's a whole new. I mean, like, you know, people when third edition came out, people would ask because especially Jonathan and I, we had both worked on a lot of different games,
Mm-hmm.
and so people would ask us, well, what game from your past influenced third edition the most, right? And the answer was, well,
D&D.
second, right? D&D influences D&D, right? It's still we had this list. We called it the Sacred Cows list when we were working on third edition, and it was all the things that we knew we couldn't change, because if we changed any of these things, it wouldn't be D&D anymore,
Yeah.
right? And that was like stats from 3 to 18 and the six stats that we all know, and rolling a D20 for attack rolls, and picking up a handful of D6s when you cast fireball, and all of these things were just sort of quintessential D&D, and we wanted to preserve all of that.
Yeah.
And it would seem that most of those things, like, I don't know that the fourth edition designers hung on to the Sacred Cows list, but kind of seems like they might have to some extent, because a lot of the stuff is still true, up to today with fifth edition.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that that phrasing was among the least well chosen of what I said.
No,
Yeah,
no,
it's
no.
not. No, but I agree with you. So that's that. Yeah, not to try and undo what I said, but yeah, it clearly was the same game, but it was you allowed it to be reimagined in a deeper way than second edition. Its mission statement was different, and I like you say, I think that's why Steve Winter and team had that idea as early as they did.
Right, right. I think so. And we were given the marching orders by Peter, who I can't overemphasize how involved Peter was with D&D in all of its. I mean, let's face it, right? WotC bought TSR because Peter loved D&D, right? And I don't think
Yeah.
that he would balk at that.
No, in fact, although when we're recording this, it hasn't gotten out to public yet. But Peter said that when I was talking to him on an earlier episode.
And so, he was very involved with all things D&D, both in the development of third edition and in some of the products. And um, so he himself gave the marching orders for third edition. Do whatever you have to do to make this the best game that it could be.
Right.
And we feel that we did that. Honestly, I've never actually asked him this, just because I haven't thought to, not because I'm afraid to, because Peter's a great guy. But like, I don't know. I would hazard the guess that we probably didn't go as far as he had originally envisioned. But
My recollection is that one of the reasons he got directly involved was that because of that, right? The first couple of drafts came in and were not pushing far enough. I seem to recall him saying that.
it could be, yeah, yeah. I mean, and third edition again. I don't know. I don't really know enough of the ins and outs of development of some of the other editions, but third edition went through a number of
Mm.
versions, some of which were drastically different than what was eventually published.
It was
And
a
it's because,
fascinating process. I'm really glad that I was there for that.
yeah, yeah, and there is there is no version that I would think, oh, I wish that had happened. I wish that could have been implemented. Like, but that isn't really the way it worked. It was more like continually iterating and building upon what we were working on and what we would do and the thing that would come next. Um, and it was a fantastic experience. Like
Yeah.
one of the best experiences of my certainly one of the best experiences of my professional career, if not the best. Right? I mean, there were days when I would come in and Jonathan and Skip and I would gather together in some meeting room at Wizards of the Coast, and we'd be like, okay, what's on the agenda for today? And it would be second level cleric spells, and that would be the topic of conversation for the entire day. And like, that's a pretty good
It's
that's a
good
pretty
job.
good way to make your living. And that's pretty cool. Sitting in a room talking to a couple of other people who really know what they're talking about, um, and talking about D&D.
All right, we got a couple of questions that are rolling in here. Uh, David Shepard says apparently Monty and Thomas Reed did an RPG adventure called The Menagerie. Oh, he's trying to help someone else figure out the question about missing Planescape.
Okay.
That might be one of the things he's thinking of. But then he also asks, please ask Monty how he got involved with Kingdoms of Calamar Player's Guide.
The what?
The Kingdoms of Calamar Player's Guide.
I have only the vaguest. I'm sorry. I apologize, but I only have like the vaguest
Yeah.
memory of that. Kingdoms of Calamar became, while I was still at Wizards, it became didn't that become a TSR or a D&D official property?
I
Or
think
something?
that it. Let me
There
just.
was there was a lot of work that I did in the years following third edition, where I was doing a lot of consulting work at TSR's or at Wizards of the Coast behest
All right.
on things that were going to be D20 or D&D, and so that's probably one of them. I remember
Yeah.
like um,
Kingdoms of Calamar. I just looked it up. I had
okay,
a suspicion it might be that was a Kenzer and Company
right,
product that they got to do because of the lawsuit over uh,
right,
Dungeons and
and so this would have been
over
one of those
the
things
Dragon
where I
magazine.
think where I was brought in kind of as a consultant.
Right.
I was uh, like some of the other stuff. I want to say that like there was some Star Trek stuff and various things where Wizards was working on deals to do different games that were all D20 based, and they were kind of sending me around to be a consultant on a lot of this stuff. So I think that's probably what it was.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, there's a point in my career where I thought this will never happen to me, but there are totally things that someone asked me at. I'm like, I didn't work on that, and they show me like I'm the main designer, and I look at it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of vaguely remember that. So in an era where you were the representative out to the community, I can imagine there are a bunch of things that you also definitely worked on, but uh, are just floating there in the brain, having vacation time.
There were a lot of things where I would just my participation would sort of be to answer somebody's questions and read over some things that they did, and then they would stick my name in the credits. And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, but that's another topic. I think I was given credit on some things that I maybe didn't even deserve, is what I'm saying.
yeah,
Like I played a very small role in some things.
yeah. You certainly because of the way third edition and the D20 era rolled out, um, and say your role in both the creation of third edition and in launching what has become the third party publishing PDF publishing scene um, gives you your name was one that everyone wanted. If we can get money involved, that'll make us
Yeah, there is some truth to that, and it is not something that I'm super comfortable with.
right. Well, then let's not talk more about that. I'm going to stop drawing. This is where I'm going to stop here. As always, I will finish this, and it will. I'll post it when it's done. If you are a subscriber to our free newsletter at 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com, you'll be the first people to get to see it. Probably a week or more before everyone else in the world. So sign up there. It's free. I'll put that up again later. All right. So it has happened as it usually does that we are now well over an hour. And yeah, just get going and we could talk forever. Particularly if people keep throwing questions at it. Chris Andrews says he'd be interested to know about your favorite character or storyline uh, from your gaming sessions. So
Oh
tell me
man,
your
I
tell
mean,
me your character's question.
um, unfortunately, because the nature of role playing games. I mean, the ones that are my most favorite are the ones that there's no way I can tell you them
Right,
quickly.
right.
And because I am almost always the DM or the GM. Um, they're almost always from that point of view. There are things that
Right.
happen in my campaign that were perpetrated upon others.
Because that's what we humans do.
That's right. Exactly.
Which kind of segues to there were a couple of questions and references to uh, Numenera and the Cipher system and other games you've done with your current company,
Mhm.
MonteCookGames.com, which I've put up there now. And we certainly, I'm looking forward, I'm really loving this series and its focus, but I'm looking forward to next year after I finish this project to opening it up to talking about other games too. Because, like you, I like and I love a lot of games out there, and I could talk about D&D for a year, and I will. But um,
Yeah, almost have.
but what's going on currently for you?
Well, here in October, uh,
Here towards the end of 2024.
we're enjoying a position where with the Cipher system we're doing a lot of fun things in addition to Numenera, which kind of started it all. We've had the great privilege to work with some other people like Old Gods of Appalachia podcast, and um, probably right around the time that this airs, or soon thereafter, we'll have the Magnus Archives RPG come out. Um, these are all wonderful things to have worked on. Super fun, um, kind of spreading the Cipher System's wings a little bit. And I'm currently working at Monte Cook Games with a lot of people who have either already been on this show, or soon will be.
Yeah.
Um, Bruce Gordell, Sean Reynolds, Charles Ryan, and then we also have we're not all a bunch of old guys. We've got some exciting new blood as well, but it's a great time. We're really loving it, and I feel like it's a really wonderful culmination of a now long and perhaps storied career.
Yeah. All right. So the last section that I like to close the shows with is on top because D&D started the hobby, the role playing game hobby. Like this is also the 50th anniversary of that too. Um, so and that's come a long way. It's a long storied way. We could have a whole conversation just about that aspect. But here on the 50th anniversary, looking back, so between us, we started gaming about the same time. We've been gaming for about 92 of the 50 years, if you add them together.
Of the 50.
Yes. Well,
You mean
you and I have both been gaming for more than 40 years. So
added together? Got it.
yes,
Okay.
they do that in sports all the time. It's a thing.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's not math, but it sells papers.
All right. Got it.
So yes, of the 50 years, we've been gaming 92 of them. Um,
Excellent.
uh, what I don't know. People have looked back and talked about how they they never thought it would get this far, or how far we've got yet to go, or what the next thing to do is. What given that when you heard about it, you had no idea what it is, and now we're here at 50 years. What um, what do you make of this 50th anniversary?
Well, I'm gonna fall into the camp of being one of those people who says that there's still so much ahead of us, and the
Mm,
reason for that is because I don't think that role playing games are just another kind of game. I think it's a whole new storytelling medium, a whole new means with which to communicate stories that has never existed before, right? Where we can all tell a story together at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and and in this interesting way of combining improv and games and whatnot, and um, and so from that point of view, I'm not comparing it to, you know, sort of just another game, but I'm comparing it to things like
Theater.
exactly, exactly. Theater and literature and whatnot, and in that way, it's just in its infancy, right? It's just a baby, and people like you and I, Stan, who have been doing this a long time, um, we've been fortunate enough to be a part of that, a part of almost the entirety of the infancy, but there's still so much more. I will say with no hesitation that 100 years from now, or D&D's 150th anniversary, that there will a people will still be marking the anniversaries, and b people will still be playing these games, but c they'll be doing it in a completely different way.
Right.
It'll be, and I don't know what that means, right? If I knew, I would be in the future. I'm pretty sure I'm not. I think that uh, it's exciting. It's exciting to think about. I think about how things have changed in those 50 years. Like I haven't been around for all 50 of them,
Mm.
but I've been around for the vast majority of those 50. And I look back to the way that I and my friends played the game and how the game products were presented and all that's and everything that had to do with it, and then how things are today. It's so different.
Yeah.
And yet I still can go back and play exactly the way I did in 77 and still have a great time at it, and that's all really cool.
And there
Like,
still are people who do.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm one of them.
Yeah.
So are
I
you, Stan. You play with me every Sunday afternoon. We play some old school gaming that is
old men
basically the
playing
way.
old games or
Exactly.
old style games.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm fascinated when I think about just the, as you were saying there, the what we thought when we started playing, what our base assumptions were, and as opposed to what people getting in now have, and how that keeps growing.
That is, it's almost a little hard to wrap your mind around it, and how different it is. Um, I was just recently talking to a friend of mine, Ethan Schonauer, and he started up a game here in Seattle. Started up this was a few years ago. Started up a game, a D&D club in a uh, all girls middle school, and the experiences that he had were fantastic, and but also really kind of, for me, mind blowing, because the experience that these kids are having is completely different than the experiences that I was having, and the way that they look at things and the way that they handle things. And and it's interesting too, because like again, I'm saying we didn't game together back in the 70s, Stan, but
Right.
we had similar experiences, and we didn't really have like an adult who could help shape our experiences and whatnot.
Right.
And these kids do, and that's really interesting. And I'm interested to see where that goes, because we were just sort of making it up as we went along, and we didn't know what was going to be good and what was going to work and what didn't.
Right.
And so them having someone like a teacher or some adult who with lots of, tons of gaming experience, they can kind of say, hey, maybe all your problems can't be solved with your sword. Maybe you've got to, think of some different way of doing that. Like, nobody told me that. And I had to figure
That was
that
all
out on
the
my
rules had, right? How could you
Exactly.
do that? You had to make that up.
Exactly. So we live in interesting times, and they're going to get more interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well then, Monty, I want to thank you for coming and chatting with me today. It has been a blast. An hour and a half went once again faster than I thought it would have.
I
Um,
had no doubt.
yeah.
When you and I get together, Stan, we can talk for way longer than this.
So hopefully, let's say after we hit the end of 50 years and I keep this show going, which is my intention, we can get back together and talk about some more stuff.
Fantastic.
All right. So this weekend, when this is airing, you and I are both going to be in Madison, Wisconsin, at Game Hall Con.
That's
So
right.
anyone who's watching this then, or if you're watching it now and if you're watching this live and you're going to be there too, this counts for you too. Stop by and say hi.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so hang on, Monty. I'm going to do an outro, and then you and I can make our goodbyes.
Okay.
So, my thanks to Monty for stopping by, having a fun conversation. These always they always hit the things I'm hoping they will, and we always get into the things I didn't know we were going to, that I would think, wow, I want to do more of that. So yeah, have Monty back sometime for sure. Reminder to everyone that we do have a free newsletter, 50 years in the dungeon.substack.com. You will, as I said earlier, get earliest access to the completed cartoon homages once they're done. You will also get discounts on things like art prints or other merch that I may produce for the show, and behind the scenes stuff, all that fun thing. Please sign up. As I say, it's free. Yes, there are paid versions. No, I'm not pushing you towards that. I'll take it if you want to throw money at me, but please go sign up. 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com. If you don't want to do that at all, though, you can go to my instagram.com/Stanex, and just about everything that I produce that is in the public realm winds up on my Instagram eventually, so you can catch all the fun drawings there. Thank you again to Monty. Since we're pre-recording this, I have absolutely no idea who's going to be on the show next week. I'm sure it'll be someone interesting. Hopefully close to as interesting as Monty. Maybe more. I wouldn't bet on it, though. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by. Thank you for everyone who came to the live taping of this. And everyone else, show up next Wednesday. We'll be live. Hopefully, knock on plasterboard, and we can chat then. Till then, thank you. Take care.